Welcome to Brendan Courtney's My First Home with AIB, the podcast where we celebrate the joy, chaos and triumph of buying your first home. Each week I sit down with guests who share their journeys to home ownership, from saving every spare cent to the day they finally get their keys. These stories will give you hope that your dreams can also come true. Welcome to Brendan Courtney's My First Home with AIB. This week, I'm joined by Dublin Camogie captain Aisling Maher. Very recently, Aisling bought her first home with her now fiancé and partner, Laura. I wanted to find out if she brought her competitive edge to the house buying process. Welcome, Aisling Maher. So, Aisling, you've had an incredible 18 months, 2 years, professionally. So just remind people, you're the captain of the Dublin Camogie team, and just to take us back, the growth, or I suppose it's not that it's grown, but the exposure of women's sport has really ramped up in the last 2 years. It's been amazing, hasn't it?
Yeah, massively. Probably even going back before the last 2 years. Like I started playing with Dublin, 12, 13 years ago at this stage. Wow. And if you contrast my experience of playing senior inter-county then to now, it's entirely different. And I guess the vast majority of those advancements have been made in the last 5-6 years, and there's been a big growth in the last 2 years, as you say. So the experience of playing senior inter-county as a female athlete is entirely different now than it was a couple of years ago, and even more so than it was 10 years ago, which is great and brilliant. We've some way still to go, I think, in getting to where we need to be. But it's been a pleasure to be part of the improvements and the developments that have been made in the last couple of years.
Give us a little window into some of the glaring changes that a Luddite like me would understand, who's never played team sports. What's the big massive changes you've seen?
So I guess one thing that's important to understand about Gaelic Games in general is that the GAA, which is what we all think of when we think of Gaelic Games, is a male-only organisation, right? So hurlers and footballers in the male codes are represented by the GAA and are members of the GAA. Someone like me who plays camogie, or an LGFA player, are members of separate organisations called the Camogie Association and Ladies Gaelic Football Association. So we're not members of the GAA at all. They're entirely separate organisations. Still to this day, have been the whole way through. So you hear people talk a lot about integration, which is the integration of the three associations into one. And that's something that's kind of, I suppose, hopefully in hand at the minute, and it's a planned change for 2027 is the proposal of when it will be enacted. So that, I guess, is the backdrop for understanding the position that we're in and the position we've been in for the last, number of decades. So I guess what that means for me as a player is that for my entire playing career, I've not been a member of the GAA, and as a result, I've had very limited, if any, access to resources that the GAA have. So whether that's finances, whether that's access to pitches, resources, basically I have access to what the Camogie Association has in terms of playing grounds and finances and everything else. So as a player, that is, I guess, significantly limited the access I have to Gaelic Games facilities. So for example, if I go out and play with Dublin, our training base will change every year based on where we can get access to a pitch in that year. And it maybe will change 2 or 3 times during the year. You might get a contract somewhere for a couple of months at the start of the year, and that might change. Whereas the difference there for the men's team, so when the men's hurlers go, they'll have Parnell Park, for example, in Dublin. That'll be their basis that they'll train out of all the time. Now, some of the things that have helped in the last number of years that kind of ease that impact on players would be things like the development of the WGPA, which was the Women's Gaelic Players Association, which was founded a number of years ago, and about 3 years ago merged with what's called the Gaelic Players Association, which is the men's players representative body, effectively.
Which has been very important, hasn't it?
Hugely important, yeah. The GPA has been central to a number of changes and developments on the men's side before the women ever became part of it. The WGPA was founded and was the first organisation to start to really kind of champion what female players are doing and ensure that they're getting access to things like government funding, increasing, the resources that are available and the protections that are there for female players. So the WGPA did really good work on really limited resources for a long time. And about 3 years ago now, they amalgamated with the GPA, which is obviously the men's side. That was a vote that would have been backed by players on both sides. So can't remember the exact figures at this stage, but 98-99% of male and female players would have voted to merge as one organisation. So now the GPA represents players of all 4 codes.
Yeah.
What that means for me as a female player is there's somewhere that I can now go where I am represented in the same body as male counterparts, and we can support each other as players across 4 codes. So we do a huge amount of work together for kind of champion whatever the issue might be within any of those 4 codes, making sure that the player's voice is across all 4 codes, and that it's not limited to one cohort of players.
Sounds. I do a TV show called Keys to Your Life, and I've done a number of legacy footballers from the Italian 90 crew who got the nanny rule, and Liverpool players and stuff like that. And actually, there was a big sort of, I suppose, revolution happened in football where the players stepped back and said, you're not looking after the players, actually you're just looking after the game. And that feels a little bit like this in that, and that's a really good thing, right? So ultimately it's positive. But what people will really know is the Scort row, right? Which for all of its, I suppose, coverage, it really pulled back to the wider audience. Actually, you're not supported properly, from what you just described, right? So it was a very important thing to happen because it opened up this conversation, really, didn't it? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there's been a couple of kind of big, I guess, protest moments, especially on the women's side in the last couple of years. So the Scorts, obviously, as you mentioned last year. And then a couple of years ago, we also had the player expenses piece where there was large scale protests on the women's side. People will probably remember that.
Wild.
So Players for Equality would have been kind of the campaign around then, and it would have been looking to equalise the funding that's available from the government for both female and male players.
Imagine that.
Yeah, so basically, like, what was happening on a practical level, for me, for the first 10 plus years that I played with Dublin, we didn't get a cent in expenses in anything. So, like, you spend a lot, you clock up a lot of mileage in the car over and back, you're spending a lot on extra food, whether that's supplements, protein, all that kind of stuff that goes into your recovery. It's really expensive to play for your county, and it's an honour and it's a privilege, and we all love to do it and all the rest. But if I was a male player, depending on what part of the country I'm in and what distances I'm traveling and what exactly I'm spending, I would have been getting anything from kind of 5 to 10 grand back a year in expenses.
I mean, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And like, you talk about me doing that for 10, 12, 15 years, obviously we're going to get into talking about houses at some point. Like, that's 120, 150,000 of expenses back across.
That's going to rule you out the property
career.
ladder. Yeah, that's going to have a big knock-on impact to you.
So it has a huge impact. We're still not at a point of equality, but I guess off the back of those processes, what we did do was start to introduce some compensation, some expenses for female players and the expenses that they're incurring, which is slowly improving, largely thanks to a lot of the work that's been done by the GPA. But yes, that was a big piece, I suppose, that had come first, and that probably showed the strength of player voice, and especially across the 4 codes. And then last year, following on from that, obviously we had the Scorts piece, which I guess going into that, we probably had a bit of awareness from the expenses piece on how strong the player's voice can be, and how change can be made when people kind of stand up and advocate for what they need and go after what they want.
It played out in a really public arena, in a kind of it was almost pantomime to watch, wasn't it? It was oh no, you didn't, oh yes you did. It was kind of bizarre. But you seem, actually, I've only met you, and it's really nice to meet you. And I have watched you on the news stage more than the sports stage, interestingly, coming from my viewpoint. But you seem kind of made for it, if you don't mind me saying, as diplomacy and an ability to see the balance and the right approach. And that obviously comes from sports training. What's your day job?
So I work in medical devices and in pharmaceuticals. I'm working as a quality manager for a medical device company at the minute. So I suppose I get a bit of it from that and from work, but I definitely
have to be very
agree.
Balanced in how you look at it.
You have to be balanced, yeah. I suppose you have to be rational. You have to kind of try and see every side of things and like be able to talk things through and problem solve and all the rest. But I definitely think that like sport helps massively in developing that aspect of, your character, your personality, how you interact with people, kind of I suppose how you go about things. It's one of the big reasons actually that we speak a lot in this day and age, I think, about maintaining girls and women in sport, and
because they seem to drop away, don't they?
Yeah, it's kind of well covered and well documented at this stage. I think that especially into those early teenage years, a lot of girls step away from sport.
Why do you think that is? I mean, apart from the obvious, and it's going to sound obvious to you, but to a wider audience and maybe even a male audience, who maybe don't have daughters, why do women drop away?
Yeah, I think, look, it's a multifaceted issue. Like, there's a lot of things that contribute to it. Obviously, when the sport stuff happened last year, we would have talked about, uniform and clothing and being comfortable in what you wear being one small aspect of that.
But important, really important.
But extremely important. And when it can be removed as quickly and as easily as the sport stuff ultimately was, okay, it was complicated in that moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it was all resolved within the space of a couple of months. When there's small barriers like that can be removed, they absolutely should be removed, because, the criticality of keeping women and girls in sports and the impact that has on them and their life and their development professionally,
and their
personally,
community and their
else.
families and everything.
Yeah. And I think the idea of like role models is hugely important in maintaining girls in sport as well. You know, every young boy has any number of sports stars in any sport that are widely visible and available and accessible and championed that he can see and look up to. I definitely think we're closer to being there now for women's sport than we were when we were younger. You know, one kind of anecdotally, one thing I always find funny is when we were a few years into playing senior intercounty and you'd get a match program and there'd be a questionnaire and everyone would have to fill out the questionnaire, and one of them would be, you know, who's your sporting hero. When I started playing, all the answers were like, you know, a Henry Shefflin or something like that, and it was very male dominated. And then gradually, you know, there might be a Sonia O'Sullivan, or as I got a little bit older, there's a good few Katie Taylors used to go in. I was always one to pick Katie Taylor as well, I'll admit. But it's brilliant to see that change more so now. You know, you'll see people throwing out Rena Buckley or Breach Corkery or someone like that, and I think that availability of female role models is so important with keeping young girls in sport, because if they can't see people doing it, then how are they supposed to deem it to be a realistic opportunity for them?
It's really simple. It's just equality, you know, but you have, I suppose you're coming from a very entrenched legacy institution, like many institutions in our culture that are, you know, struggling to change. But definitely, I think your performance with the short issue and the skort issue, like it really showed that with the, you know, slowly in the months you get what the results you want. And I felt overall, apart from a few obvious hiccups, there was a willingness to change, wasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, look, there was a larger frustration piece there from a player's perspective, insofar as it wasn't a new issue. It wasn't something that had come up overnight. You know, if you're someone who's involved in Gaelic games and particularly in camogie, you're well aware that this
is so hard not to get angry about that.
Yeah. I suppose it is, but you don't get anywhere then as well. You know, like by and large, people are trying to work towards the same thing and want the same goals. So I suppose the quicker you get angry and frustrated, it's like anything in life, right? You don't actually get that far with it. So if you can work with people, it generally works better. But yeah, it was frustrating that it kind of took time, and in some ways it was frustrating that it took public opinion and the, you know, the general public getting involved and having their say on it to cause that change. Obviously, you look back now and you say, well, it was great because it made the change happen, and we tried to make the change happen several times up until then, and it hadn't worked. And in hindsight, one of the big reasons that it happened at the time that it did is because I suppose it drew that kind of national attention and international attention, and put pressure on the powers that be to find a way and make it happen. But look, ultimately you can reflect on it and say the whole thing was wrapped up before the All-Ireland Championship even started, and there was the option by the time the All-Ireland started for players to go out wearing skirts or shorts, whichever they were more comfortable in, and ultimately I think that's a positive outcome.
You're the ultimate diplomat. The ultimate diplomat thinks twice before saying nothing. Brilliant. You're right, yeah, and there's no point in being angry. If only everybody could take a lesson out of your book. So you've done all this, which is really quite intense, and you have a full-time job, and you just told me there you got engaged, you turned 30, and you bought a house. Well done.
Thank you very much.
High five for all of them. AIB's team of advisors are here to help you on your journey to get the keys to your own home. Click the link in the podcast notes to find out more. So you bought your first home?
Yeah, I did.
Tell me a bit about your personal life, if you don't mind. So who did you buy it with? How did it come about?
Yeah, so my girlfriend, or my fiance as I should say, I keep getting corrected for getting this wrong. Her name's Laura. We've been together for over 6 years at this stage.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So we were thankfully very fortunate to be able to buy a house towards the end of last summer, end of August. We went sale agreed. I had to check all the details before coming on today. Yeah. I'd gotten a few of them wrong, but I'm reliably informed. 30th of August we went sale agreed last year.
It is a winding road. You can forget details for sure. You check your spreadsheets. What date did that
I think you block a bit of it out as well afterwards. Possibly, when you get through it. So
it was your first time?
First time, yeah, first house. So I'd been living at home. We're both from Dublin. Laura's from Donabate and I'm from Marino, so we're both from Dublin.
You're both Northsiders?
Both Northsiders. Couldn't possibly go over to the south side now. Let's not be ridiculous.
I straddle. I'm a bit of cool, like I'm a bit of Tala. I'm all over the place, yeah.
So yeah, we had been living outside of home for a few years. Renting, yeah.
Sorry, no, just to give, I love the details on this. So you've been renting together.
Yeah.
So you're sharing the rent, which is great. And also, if you're a couple as well, it kind of, you can reduce the rent a little bit so you can save a bit more.
Yeah. So we had been renting together and also with two others as well. So a friend of ours and my younger sister were living with us. So there had been 4 of us in the house. So reduced the rent down a bit, which
all
is
sporty people.
All sporty people. Yeah, Michelle, who we lived with, was a 2-time Olympian, so she's a proper sports person.
Wow, really?
Yeah, passes me out. A funny side story actually, when we moved into the house first, when we started renting, and I didn't know Michelle before she'd moved in, and we met her the first time, and we were playing camogie.
So was
very
this,
serious.
sorry, was it just a coincidence that she happened to be sporty?
We were mutual friends.
Okay,
So we were looking for someone to rent a room, and mutual friends had put us in contact, and she came over to view it, and I kind of gave her a bit of a lecture on this being a serious sports house, and if she was going to move in, we wouldn't be out partying every Friday night and everything else. And Michelle very politely smiled and nodded at me, and then as soon as we moved in, it became quickly apparent she was the real sports person and I was the one out partying most of the time, not her. So look, we were very fortunate that we were in a position where we were able to rent with good friends for a number of years. I think that made a huge difference in us being able to save and kind of have a bit of a deposit and be able to go and take the step then to buy after that. We did move home for a few months, so I think our lease had finished in the April, and we had kind of been probably passively talking about it and looking
just
at buying.
Take the final hurdle.
We needed the kick of going home and realizing, as
Did
29
you home
at the time, home separately, yeah.
Wow,
so
good for
my
you.
Mother would have had a heart attack if I moved in with Laura and her family, and Laura's mother would have had a heart attack if she moved in with me.
Every family relates to this, and it's a little bit particularly towards women as well, isn't it? No matter what.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, you did right by everyone.
We did right by everyone, so we kind of
went
over and back.
But you did right by everyone.
We went over and back between the two. Look, we were very fortunate that we were both in a position where our parents were.
And every dub says that as well, because you're near where you're trying to buy and work. Yeah. So you actually have a little bit of an advantage that your parents can take you back. So we do all accept it. And are grateful for that for sure.
Yeah, no, huge advantage, and very fortunate that both of our families were happy to let us do that and kind of support us in doing that. Makes a huge difference, even just for the timings of trying to finish a lease or trying to finish renting and then trying to buy at the same time. Like I know from other people who've tried to do it, it's nearly impossible to get them to line up perfectly such that you're not doubling a payment or worse, without somewhere for a couple of months in between. So that
of course, you've got to line it all up.
Yeah. And then I guess going home, and I was 29 at the time, moving back home gave me a bit of a kick to get going and actually seriously try look for somewhere as well. So we were very fortunate to have that support. And I guess at the end of the day, when you've lived out of home for a while, you don't want to be going back in, moving in with parents and stuff again. So I suppose it does give you the bit of a push to get moving and be proactive about the whole thing too.
And give us a sort of a list of the push. So you go home, you need to get to X to get to Y. So did you go and see a mortgage advisor at the start of the outset to know what your path was, or how did you figure out what the path was towards buying?
Yeah, we did. We went and got some advice on it. I suppose we'd friends and stuff that had bought previously, so we were speaking to them as well. Laura's self-employed, so that kind of added another dynamic to it as well, because we weren't sure what that meant from her. So she went and got a bit of advice on that, and obviously she would have had accounts and stuff like that up to date, but just knowing what exactly is needed, how they need to be presented, what the bank are going to look for, what they're going to need to see, how much savings you need to show, how many months of statements you need to show, stop going to coppers and spending money in coppers for a few months and all that kind of thing helps a bit. So I guess you have a rough idea, I think, when you go into these things, but getting a bit of advice on the specifics and what exactly you want to be able to show and present, and just being able to maximize as much savings as you have going into it as well for the few months before.
Did you get an understanding of what your price range was?
Yeah, we did, and it definitely took going in and speaking to someone and talking about what your borrowing potential is, whether or not you can get an exemption to go above that, how easy or hard that is.
Very good.
We looked at a range of houses, including some that needed mountains of work done. So we were obviously looking at the potential to take a mortgage and take a home improvement loan on that, what that would look like. At one stage we were looking at a house that probably would have needed a year, if not 2 years work done on it, and then that would have changed requirements for us in terms of we would have needed to be able to show that we could afford to pay that mortgage and still have somewhere to live that wasn't that house for that period of
Yeah.
time. So things like that can make it quite complicated. Because of the nature of where we were looking, we weren't eligible for, there's no new builds in those areas.
Okay.
So we weren't eligible for any of those kind of first time buyer schemes that might have supported it.
Yeah.
So they were ruled out for us, but we did look at some houses where they would have been eligible for the vacancy grant. So things like that, I suppose, just getting
So
as
you did
much
your
information
homework.
as you can. Yeah, well, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to get there. It's a bit of a whirlwind when you're in it. You kind of have to learn quickly and take on as much as you can, and then
it's a learning curve that goes like that.
Yeah, and then as soon as you're out of it, forget it all as well immediately afterwards.
So tell me about finding that. So you knew what you had to do. You knew what your price range was. You're open-minded. So you're looking at fixer-uppers. There's not a lot of new houses where you were looking. You're looking on a wider view of North Dublin. Are you looking around like further out as well?
Yeah. So
how long were you looking?
Well, I suppose we started seriously looking about April when we had moved out, but we had kind of been passively looking since maybe the January. And then definitely by the time we got to summer, I kind of feel from our experience anyway and talking to other people, a lot of houses do come up in that spring, summer window when kind of it's brighter, the weather's generally nicer, hopefully in Ireland, you never know. But there seems to be more houses out then.
Yeah.
There does also seem to be more people out looking then. The demand seems to be that bit higher. Someone had mentioned to us that often, people with young kids will look to buy such that they can get in before the school year starts. Which means that it can be that bit more competitive across the summer window. But there definitely seem to be more houses coming up and stuff around that time. So I suppose that was when we did the vast majority of our looking. Like you said, kind of across a wide enough area of North Dublin. Laura, as I mentioned, is Donabate. I probably wasn't willing to go quite as far as Donabate, but if she asks, I was open to it at the time. We did look at some out there, but a lot of them were new builds, and to be honest, they were as expensive as that kind of Marino, Whitehall, Beaumont area, which is that bit closer to town, and for me to Vincent's and to home. So we wanted to stay somewhere that was close to the M1 and close to the M50 for us, for her getting home and me getting to work, but also stay in that kind of that wider area. And I think in general, like, it sounds really obvious, but if you can have a bit of a wider catchment when you're looking, the narrower you go with your search, the more restricted you're going to be. The
more limiting it is, yeah. So how did you remember the moment you found the house? Did you know that was it?
Yeah, so the first time I went to view the house we bought, Laura wouldn't come with me. She said, no, absolutely not, don't like that one. Not going. We'd done, as everyone who buys probably will tell you, we'd done months of going to 4, 5, 6,
Do you ever have days where you
7.
met the same people at houses?
Every single one we went to, yeah.
I think there's a TV format in that, by the way. Hi. Yeah. I could probably want you dead next week, but never. Nice to see you.
Yeah, and it's like, for me anyway, because I was like roughly around the area I grew up, I was seeing loads of people who I like kind of knew or half knew or used to know when you were a kid, and you don't know them well enough to chat to them, but you know them well enough that you can't ignore them. So there's a lot of that repeat faces going through, and it's mind numbing, to be honest, when you're in the middle of it. Like it is really tough to stay motivated about it. And I guess for us, the area that we were looking and the price range within that area, we were probably never going to buy somewhere that was gorgeous, glossy finish, recently renovated, perfect house. So there's an element of when you go and look, you kind of have to like psych yourself up for a little bit and say, well, if we got rid of the different color carpet in every room, and if we stripped the wallpaper, and if we painted it and did this and did that. So you have to emotionally invest into the house that you go into. Have
some sort of vision.
Yeah. So that's like taxing and draining when you do that, and you kind of get yourself to a place where you say, okay, now I see it and now I can kind of feel it, and maybe this could be great, and then suddenly it goes up by 100 grand and you're saying, nope, never mind. Let's start again. So that side of it's really tough. The house that we ended up getting, I had gone to see first. It was in an area that I really liked. The garden was north facing on it, which was a big no-no for Laura, who is mad into her veg and all that kind of thing. But fortunately, it's quite a long garden, so it actually gets a lot of sun at the end of it. So I'd gone to see it, and I thought, in comparison to a lot of the other houses in the area, which were jumping massively and the competition was really high for them, I thought this one was more reasonably priced. So I actually went to see it twice by myself before I even convinced her to go and look at it. And fortunately, when we went back together the third time, our lovely new neighbour who was there at the time had invited us into her house. When Laura asked about the sun and the light and everything else, she gave us a tour and showed us hers, and she's put an awful lot of work into it and done a gorgeous job.
It's lovely.
with an extension and skylights and a nice patio seated area down the end, which does get the sun kind of pretty much all day, and reassured Laura that her veg would get plenty of light down the end of it. And we embarked in the whole kind of, I suppose, mentally prepping yourself up for it and what you could do and how it could look. And thankfully we had a better outcome on that one.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That kind of stars aligned on that for you then. If the neighbour even came out and said, come and see what it could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's lovely. Story.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, and we'd had actually a couple of houses that we'd bid on in the couple of months up to that, where we'd had a lot of, you know, those mind-numbing bidding wars over and back where you go up by 1,000, I go up by 1,000, you go up by 1,000. It's really, really difficult. And one thing that we did actually on our house when we bought it in comparison was someone had given us the advice to put in an offer and put a time limit on it. So give something that you believe is reasonable and competitive, but say it's on the table for 24 hours and take it or don't. And it was what I found it really good advice, because when you're...
I have never heard that advice before.
Yeah, when you're in, like, look, you really have to understand the position that the house is in and that the seller's in and that, I suppose, you know, the demand is in, because if there's 3 people bidding and you say that, they're going to say, grand, don't care, see you later. But with this particular house, it had been up for a month or more at that point, and the offer that was in and it was around asking. So we had gone up from the asking price and put in an offer that we thought was relatively competitive, and we knew the seller had moved out, that they had been renting it and they'd moved out the tenants. So we also were aware that they weren't getting the rent for the last number of months while it had been up in the market, which
they needed to get rid of it.
Yeah, so they're going to want to move it at that stage, and the seller wasn't living in the country, so again, you know, it probably is something that they want to get rid of sooner rather than later. So I think understanding the position that the seller was in and then taking back that little bit of control, because it feels sometimes like you've absolutely no control when you're in the process of...
Well, you don't.
You don't, but you can pretend you do, which
well,
makes it feel a bit better.
That is a little bit of control, because that's also you very cleverly, not only are you giving them a time constraint, but you're giving yourself an out. You're
100%.
saying, if this doesn't work in 24 hours, we're out.
Yeah,
we move on. Yeah,
and there was a lot of that, I think, for us with previous houses that we bid on when we thought we were there and we thought we'd put in a good offer, and you could be 2 or 3 days thinking you've got something, and then suddenly someone comes back and they've gone up 10 grand and now it's out of budget for you. So that was part of the intention for it. Now I will say, well, that sounds like a very clever solution. They did come back and say no thank you and not take our offer on it, and that was really frustrating, because, you know, from our perspective, we'd made an offer that was above asking, better than anyone else had offered, and they didn't have another stronger offer and they still said no to it, which I found infuriating at that time, you know. And it nearly feels like it should be illegal, that if you make an offer above what they've asked and nobody else one-ups you, that you should get it. So we had a bit of a back and forth with the estate agent then at that point, and I kind of felt like, you're trying to ask us to bid against ourselves towards an unknown number that could be any amount now, because we've passed the asking price. And anyway, she was very nice and helpful, and she had shown us a couple of other houses previously and stuff, so she knew we were serious and that was the area that we wanted to be in and stuff. And eventually she went back to the seller and had a conversation with them, and they came back and said, look, if you put another 10 grand on it, we'll take it off and go sale agreed straight away.
Okay. And
so at that point we agreed to do that, which look, would you have got it for less? Would it have gone for more? We felt it was a reasonable number at that point, so we were just happy to kind of get out of the process and get something over the line. Yeah, well done. You played that well, because it sounds even stressful even talking about it, doesn't it? AIB's team of advisors are here to help you on your journey to get the keys to your own home. Click the link in the podcast notes to find out more. Okay, so you get the house. You remember the day you got the keys? Yeah, I do. And it was actually, funnily enough, it was the same day that the GAA All-Stars were on last year.
Oh, wow.
So myself and Laura were due to go into the All-Stars. So we were under a bit of time pressure. By the time we went down and collected the keys, we went into the house and we were supposed to do just a quick 10 minutes of, you know, yay, we've got the keys, and then go and get ready for the All-Stars. And I'd say I left Laura alone for 3 minutes, and I came in and she started pulling wallpaper off walls, and the carpet was half up in one corner of the room, and the place was a mess already. But I guess that committed us to doing renovations in that room before we moved in. So yeah, it was the first day in was a short enough day, and we did kind of a couple of weeks before we properly moved into it. But it was just a relief, to be honest, to get them and to know you have it and to have somewhere to start working with.
Yeah, I mean, it's buying your first home now is turning into more of a relief than a celebration sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's your big learning from the experience?
I think it's a really emotionally taxing process, more than I probably expected it to be. I think maybe naively I thought, because we were fortunate, as we mentioned, and had the opportunity to go home, that would take a bit of pressure off. We had been able to build a decent deposit, and we were relatively flexible with the areas we were looking in and stuff like that. I kind of thought, look, we'll tip away at this here and it'll eventually happen. And I think at some point during the process, I realized, no, we're actually going to have to, get really aggressive and single-minded about this and make it our entire personalities for a period of time, which was really challenging for us as well. With, obviously, I play sport and Laura's a nutritionist, so she'd be away with sports teams the whole time. So evenings and weekends are when the vast majority of house viewings are on, and it became kind of difficult to actually attend viewings and go to them. So I think my biggest learning was just you really need to make it a priority and almost another full-time job for a period of time, and obviously balance that with patience. I think another thing that I fell victim to early in the process especially was you have a number in mind when you go and view a property with what you think a reasonable limit is for that. It's very easy to become emotionally invested or taxed by the whole process and suddenly say, well, what's another $5,000, what's another $10,000? And thankfully the house that we bought ultimately wasn't one where we'd gone up massively and really stretched ourselves, but in hindsight, we put bids on houses that would not have been good decisions for us had we got them at that price. Now, thankfully, in hindsight, we didn't get them, but I think, some of the ones we look back at, I mentioned one that would have taken about 2 years to do up and we would have spent all the money we had on it, and other ones that, you get caught up in the moment of just really wanting to get somewhere and liking the idea of the house, and it's easy to kind of get caught up in that and stretch yourself further than you should. But I think establishing a max and sticking by it and being able to walk away is a really important tool to have.
And it's really good advice that somebody like you, such a a professional athlete who also manages other athletes, that you've acknowledged that you can get caught up in the emotion of it all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's really difficult not to, because you have to be emotional when you're thinking about where you want to spend the rest of your life and where you want to be based, and trying to envisage, can I spend the rest of my life with you here? Can we have a family here? Can we, what could this place be? That's an emotional ask, right? So you're getting into it, and also
that's very well observed.
And also I suppose for us, we were at home. We had been living together for a number of years previously, and then you've split up and you go home. So you want to get back towards living together and starting that next chapter of your life. So I think it definitely, for me, it was difficult to detach the emotions.
Well, it's all emotional, and then you've got to be practical and think about your money and your finances, and it's the biggest. One of the biggest things you'll ever do, and they say that, and they've always said that long before we had the pressure on housing in this country. And there's, from my twopence worth, there's always been massive pressure on housing. It's just that there's nowhere to rent even now. That's what the big other pressure is that we didn't have before. So it's hard not to get angry about it sometimes as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did you find the whole application process and the drawdown and all the technical side of it? How was that for you?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been something that I would have been familiar with before I started.
Nobody is.
Nobody is, I suppose. Yeah.
Unless you work in a bank.
Unless you work in a bank. But I guess I wouldn't have been massively financially literate either. I wouldn't have had. Obviously, I have no background in accounting or anything like that. So I think for me, the biggest learning was being able to put your hand up and be I haven't got a clue about this. Somebody help me. Somebody tell me. And obviously, you can walk into a bank and get support off them there, and that's worth a huge amount. But I think as well as that, for me, talking to girls on my team or friends that I had who'd been through it recently, getting their advice, asking them, how did you choose which interest rate you're going to go on, or how did you choose all that sort of stuff. You get really practical advice from people who've been in it or been through it recently, and as we mentioned, your knowledge curve comes all the way up and then goes all the way down afterwards. So being able to draw on that from people and people you trust and people who've been through it recently is really helpful and really beneficial. And just not being afraid to ask and say, listen, I haven't got a clue about this. Why would I do this? Why would I go for this rate as opposed to that rate? Or why would I go for this mortgage as opposed to that mortgage? I think that is beneficial, and just trying to find out as much information as you can, ask as many questions as you can, give yourself the best opportunity.
What did you do with the house then? What renovations have you done? Have you managed?
So we're ultimately planning to do a relatively big renovation on it. So we have an old style separate kitchen and dining room. So we want to copy our next door neighbor and knock them together and put on an extension. So in the meantime, we're trying to do superficial and cheap, let's say, renovations. So we've done a lot of painting, a lot of kind of changing colours of stuff, painted the kitchen, pulled up the floors that were there, put down new floors, painted walls. There was a lot of yellow in our house when we bought it, and a couple of red walls as well, which were not to our taste, to say the least. So we've gone for a neutral palette to replace that as a base. And honestly, like the difference,
and just the colour can help.
Yeah, and just getting up the carpets and putting down wooden floors and putting down a neutral base in the walls. You know, it's actually one thing that probably helped us in the process of trying to buy is like, I really believe that if whoever was selling our house had spent a bit of money on just making the walls white and putting down clean floors, that it probably would have gone for a chunk more than it did. So in some ways it worked in our favor that we were able to kind of go in and look at somewhere and say, okay, ignore the carpets, ignore the wall color. So getting that sort of stuff done has been big. And then just like, you know, all getting your own stuff into it, whether that's prints or photos, or, you know, we had obviously sofa and stuff like that from where we were renting before, getting all that kind of thing into it and making it feel clean and new and painted and fresh has made a big difference. So plenty of big renovations to come, but trying to just get in and enjoy
one
it
step
as
at
it
a
is.
time. One step at a time. You mentioned something there, which is the big joy of it, and actually it's a skill that not a lot of people have, because even when you're selling, you know, they'll say put coffee on, put some croissants in the oven, make the house smell homely. What estate agents will tell you is that people really lack vision. So that's why finished houses sell quicker, but the other thing I've heard, which kind of contradicts that slightly, is people, say for example, a young couple are really pushed to their collar. So when they go to a house, it's much better if it's finished because they've no money left to do anything with it, you know. So there's there's one version of that, and then there's the actual practical version. People just don't seem to have the money to do anymore because everything is so expensive. Building is expensive. So yeah, it's kind of, but I think having the vision that you had, which is just stop looking at the colors and see past that. And I think your little magic sauce with Laura was the neighbor bringing you in.
Yeah, no, definitely it helped massively because, like you say, it's hard to visualize these things, and when you
that's
can
just
see
human contact. That's gorgeous.
Yeah. And also, you're going to be living next door to these people, hopefully for a long time.
You know, she's sound. Yeah,
you know, she's nice. Yeah, so that makes a big difference for sure. And I absolutely agree with that. That, like, you know, it's hard to see things, but like those minimal changes, I think, make a big difference. And the other piece of advice that we got on that was, like, if you go into somewhere and it's absolutely perfect and it's finished to a great spec, it's probably not to your taste anyway. So even if it's nice and easier to look at and all the rest, you probably end up spending money in the next 5 years changing the color or changing the style or changing the design regardless. So if you can look past the fact that you don't like, you know, the carpets or the wallpaper or the color, and accept that, you know, look, we'll make do with it for a while, we'll change what we can. A tin of paint does a lot and isn't very expensive. So if you can do the bare minimum, you'll probably end up spending money later down the line anyway.
Do you love the house?
Yeah, absolutely love it. Yeah, it's just lovely to have your own space, and we've closed the doors on any of the rooms that we haven't been able to afford to renovate or haven't had the time to renovate. We're not even looking at them, so we'll just stay in. You know, we did a bit of a job to our bedroom and the sitting room and the kitchen. And, I have a nice little coffee nook in the corner of the dining room, which is probably the only part that's actually properly finished, and I just look at that all day. I'm happy with that.
So when's the big day? When's the wedding?
It's a great question.
You have that lovely north-facing garden now. You can put a big teepee up there or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. We could.
Like 1960s.
We'd need to get a bit more of the renovations done, I think, before the house would be ready to host a wedding. But we had originally said, we got engaged towards the end of last year, and we were kind of saying 2027 will be the year then at that stage, and the longer we get into 2026 and the less wedding planning we've done, the less realistic that feels. But no, we don't have any dates in the diary yet, but hopefully over the next year or maybe two at this stage.
Listen, you've done the big stuff.
Yeah, well, we've done enough to last for a while anyway.
You have. Thank you so much for coming in. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Best of luck with the wedding.
Cheers. Thank you.
But wait, there's more. Each week on My First Home, AIB Home Advisors Anne-Marie Elliott and Marie Smith join us in studio with expert advice on starting your home journey. Welcome to the podcast, Anne-Marie Elliott. Get your pen and paper ready. Aisling bought with her partner and is very happy. and our experience seems to have gone pretty well and pretty textbook. Tell me about the nice experience of moving to letter of offer. What happens there?
So obviously you have your approval in principle in place as it stands. So the bulk of your lending assessments, everything is already done. So what you should be just doing is, depending on the time frame between going from approval in principle to finding your property and looking to go to letter of offer, you may have to provide an up-to-date payslip and an up-to-date bank statement of, would say, the most that your main bank account that you get paid into.
Because on that now, the approval in principle is for a year, right?
For 12 months, yeah.
For 12 months, yeah.
So then you're moving to letter of offer, and the letter of offer is 6 months.
Okay.
So you're just providing the most up-to-date documents, and then you're showing exactly where you're getting your balance of funds from, how you're funding your deposit, if there is any government supports included in it. And of course, you're specifying here, because the initial approval was approval in principle for the maximum amount possible. So you're specifying the exact purchase price, the amount now that you're going for, your interest rate, and your term that you're going for as well. So it's all the specifics.
And Marie, the way you're describing it, I'm getting excited just thinking about it.
And the property details.
Oh, I'm so excited. Check out the podcast notes to book an appointment with an AIB mortgage advisor. Thank you so much for listening to Brendan Courtney's My First Home with AIB. We'll be back next week with more unique and uplifting stories to inspire you on your journey to owning your first home. Bye for now. Allied Irish Bank PLC and AIB Mortgage Bank UC are regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.